What about other parties? So another party, this is another country that signed up to the agreement. Well, listed here some of the more important ones. Obviously there's something like 189 who have signed up to the agreement, and I've just put some subjects, themes that are dealt with in what's called the INDC. This is the intended nationally determined contribution. This is what each of those countries brought to the international arena to say what they would do. So specifically on agriculture, you can see that Brazil, China, India, Indonesia, Japan, Mexico, New Zealand mention agriculture as part of their climate commitment. Food security, also mentioned by a few of those countries. Note that it's often developing countries are very worried about food security. Forestry is also, in a lot of cases, a very important component. I add Russia to that list, Switzerland as well. The land sector in general, that's more of the integrated view. Brazil, China, USA, I think I would take off the brackets on that. It's very clear that the land sector is part of their commitment overall. Accounting principles, we won't talk about it today, but how to do the accounting and how to measure for land. The diagram I showed before shows how complex it is. It's quite critical to get a good set of accounting rules, but these are important for quite a few member states. So LULUCF, in the, let's say, more traditional way that it's looked at in Kyoto Protocol, the EU is thinking of it in that way. We're not alone, there are also other parties that do it like that. So it's definitely the case that internationally there is concern about agriculture, there's concern about forestry, there's concern about land. What are we doing? Well, the commitment, as I said, gives these targets -43, -30 for the non-ETS, and this on the right side, the green box on the right hand side is what I just would like to focus on a little bit, is that it brings farms, if you like, fully into that green box. So whilst a part of the emissions on farms are accounted under the ESR, the effort sharing regulation, and another part under the LULUCF, I think that's not of a direct concern to farmers. Neither of these regulations are addressed at farms. They're addressed at member states, and the member states then have to define policy. And maybe that policy will be supported with European policy, like the Common Agricultural Policy, or it might be supported through state measures. That's a question for each member state to decide the balance. But there is a component there that's where farming actually fits. What are the impacts that we might be expecting to see, or a farmer might expect? Well, there will be climatic change differences. There will be negative and positive. In some cases, yields may increase even. We've done a study a few years ago with DG Agri and the Commission, and there were some regions in Europe which actually saw a bonus from the warming of the climate, particularly northern ones. It might even be the case of Lithuania. But at the same time, the yields might be affected by, I don't know, increase in fungi or pests. So it's very much not so easy to forecast what is going to happen tomorrow. Quality and stability of food production, there will be a challenge. So how do we respond? Natural environment, diseases, extreme weather events. So we're going to see significant changes, and we need to define policies that are going to be able to provide resilience, so make it more stable for farms to be able to produce, and at the same time help us to reduce greenhouse gas. So fundamentally, what does this proposal do that the Commission has brought out for the non-ETS, the two sectors? So it really brings the CO2 commitment for land, farmland in particular, into the EU climate and energy framework for the first time. Because up till now, it's very much been to the side and not actually contributing directly. There have been measures linked to CAP, but they don't count directly if they're related to CO2. They don't count towards the member states' target. This structure is very much in line with, first of all, what EU leaders agreed in October 2014. So that was the, if you like, the instructions that we received at the Commission to try to devise a policy proposal, fitting in with the 2030 emissions target, and also the Paris Agreement. That's not surprising because, of course, the EU has been very heavily involved in ensuring that the Paris Agreement is structured in a way that reflects our view. At the same time, it's also, we think, compatible with the food security and biodiversity objectives. So it provides a lot of flexibility of where measures would be taken. It provides opportunity to make decisions at member state level and even lower than that in some member states it's needed. And in terms of biodiversity, it's also important that we protect the existing policy objectives of biodiversity in the framework. So here it relates a little bit to ensuring that the way that each member state uses its land is correctly managing with respect to the other policy areas. On a slightly more technical nature, we would change the way we do LULUCF accounting. Maybe one or two of you in the room are aware of it, but information needs to be collected on activities at the moment. So how many hectares of cereal production, how many hectares of pasture land, what is being turned into forest, what is being turned from forest into other land. And that is quite a burdensome task. And in fact, it's a double task, because there is one set of accounting rules under the Kyoto Protocol, and then another set that has to be reported to the United Nations. So we're proposing to merge this together, reduce the amount of administrative burden, and, for example, allow member states to use primarily data that they collect already from farmers, for example, through the CAP payments. Why not use existing systems that you have to provide those data? So to reduce the administrative burden. It's definitely not intended to create an administrative burden for farmers. That's absolutely the taboo area of any proposal from our side. It also ensures that biomass would be accounted properly. At the moment, biomass from forests is not inside the EU system, and this would bring it inside the EU system. I think that's important to then be able to have forests contribute properly, also in terms of the reductions that they can make, and that would propose the reductions in emissions that they should make, and this would promote feedstocks that are sustainable and actually do show real reductions, which is again another opportunity. So this is all done through so-called new flexibilities, which is basically the way that the accounts are put together. I won't go into that in detail, but I can answer questions on it if necessary. So the objective there is to be able to define policies that are applicable inside each member state that incentivize additional mitigation. I thought it's useful just to give an idea of the targets. So, maybe a point to this, as you can see Lithuania here. So Lithuania is at the right-hand end. The targets were calculated for member states based on GDP. So I'm glad to see that Lithuania is a little bit higher than right at the bottom. That's good. That it's recognized that Lithuania is with a group of countries that has still a lot of efforts to make. It's a big effort, I should say, to make this kind of changes. So it's recognized that these countries are given lower targets, whereas the richer countries are given higher targets. Effectively, the countries at this end can afford to do something. It's less able to be found the money to do it on the other side. Now, what's interesting on this chart is the green and dark blue, like this, for Denmark, which shows the flexibility. And you can see that Lithuania actually has a big recognition of the agricultural sector. We were noting yesterday evening that Lithuania has about 30% of its emissions in the non-ETS sector are from agriculture, non-CO2. So it's a very big, tough question to reduce in that area. And consequently, Lithuania has a very big possibility, it's not an obligation, but a possibility to use land to help to adjust for that emissions. And so in the most extreme case, Lithuania's target effectively becomes 4% because of extra mitigation in LULUCF. It's a bit of a technical issue, but you can see that for the LULUCF flexibility, it's, I think, the second biggest island. I think it's a little bit more flexibility, but it's very well recognized that the agriculture sector is very important in Lithuania. For the other countries that are in the room, so Latvia, we can also see that with a small amount of flexibility, still nevertheless quite a significant part of the overall target, and Estonia with a slightly bigger target, 13%, and yet 1 or 2% flexibility. Okay, I think probably my time is up, but as I said, I have in the slides a whole load of information on studies, which I would be very interested if you have comments on them later. We've commissioned these through consulting bureaus and also universities. I've put the links into the slides. They deal with what kind of measures can take place on farms, whether they are effective, cost effective, whether they need investment from farms. So we have more than this, we have quite some fiches. Each of these particular measures often has a fiche of 5, 6, 7 pages describing the scientific background, the type of circumstances it's most suited to. So I keep going through because there's quite a lot of studies. That circle is on one slide. Here, we also came up with an estimate of what we felt was able to be delivered from land across the EU. It's about 40 million tons. That's quite a reasonable component, and again, it's we also break it down per member state as well a little bit, but this is very much the macro level view. And this study at Camp 2 is about the impacts on production. And I think from the perspective of what would happen if you take such measures, would it change yield, would it change livestock production? This would be very useful for your scientists to get an idea of the economic modeling based on different measures. Okay, I won't go into the details, but again, it deals with different ways of treating, mostly in this case, non-CO2 emissions. So, to summarize, what we've done in putting this proposal together is we made a quantitative assessment of the impacts across all member states and across this whole of the farming and forestry sector, and tried to get an understanding of where we would be able to go. We've set LULUCF into the framework with a specific set of rules, so it stays as a pillar, if you like, because it does have quite some issues about how to do that accounting that are very special. But we provide flexibility within LULUCF and between LULUCF and ESR in order to be able to get incentives for action more able to be identified. We've tried to standardize and simplify the reporting that's required for member states, provide therefore additional mitigation incentives, and keep it in line with the EU's commitments made in France. And so, what stage are we at now? It's currently, the proposal is with the European Parliament and with the Council, in particular the Environment Council, the Working Party. All the documentation is at that